I think it's time to answer a very important question against Iowa. I think it's a good time to answer a very important question as Oregon gets ready for Iowa.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again, for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Lots to get to. I'm giving my top individual standouts, not under the radar, just overall. Basically, Oregon's 5 best players this season on today's show. And is it more likely Oregon wins big or Iowa wins big? That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Will Stein faces a pretty significant test this week. Phil Parker, the Iowa defensive coordinator, whatever he said in the past, however Dan Lanning might try and use that, this is a really significant test for the Oregon offense. And if Oregon's offense doesn't look good in this game, I doubt some people that are already critical of Will Stein will understand how difficult of a spot it is to go on the road and play well against the Hawkeyes defense, which is giving up 13 points a game on the year and is one of the best across the board in all of college football. But I think it is incredibly fair to go into it with a certain expectation of, okay, what's good? Like what, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, send me a message, all that stuff. What would be an offensive performance? If you're someone that has been incredibly critical of Oregon's offense coordinator, what performance from a point standpoint that the offense puts up? Because remember, it was 20 points against Indiana, but for the offense, it was actually 13 because you had the pick six. So how many points would the offense need to score for you to feel good against the Hawkeyes? To me, and I'm sure this is going to seem low to some people, the answer is 24. If Oregon scores 24 points or above, I don't think I'll have very many bad things to say about the offense. Iowa is not a program that recruits at the same level as Ohio State. They're not a program that goes out and attacks the transfer portal in the same way that, like LSU or Texas Tech did in the offseason or Colorado does each year, or even the way Oregon does, quite frankly. They're a program, though, year in, year out, they just go out and figure out a way to put a top-tier defense on the field. That's just the way that they're wired. That's the way that they've always done it. That's the way they'll continue to do it so long as Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker are the top 2 coaches in charge as the head coach and defense coordinator. So Indiana, who I think we can all agree is a very good football team, one of the best, I think the best or second best in all of college football. I've got them number 2 in my top 25 over on Locked On College Football. Indiana is really good. In this same exact building, and I don't believe Iowa was off a bye in that one with extra time to prepare. Now, Oregon has extra time as well, so if you want to factor that in, I think that's completely fair and not say that it's more of an advantage for Iowa, but they are at home in this spot. If Oregon scores 24 more points, they will have scored more than the Indiana offense did in Kinnick Stadium earlier this year. The Hoosiers put up 20 points. That was it. If Oregon goes and wins this game 28-17, I'd feel great about the Oregon offense. And the good news going into this game is I don't have major questions on defense, and I don't have major questions on special teams. That doesn't mean there are none. There are always some questions because there's no such thing really as a perfect football team. It doesn't exist. Even the 2019 LSU national championship winning team that I contend is the best college football team of all time, their defense wasn't perfect. I bet you could go and nitpick certain stuff. I don't think they ran the ball incredibly well, but they were just so darn good that, their deficiencies were hidden by the rest of their team. So, if Oregon were to score 24 more points, yeah, I'd feel good. That's where my expectation is at. It's November. It's starting to get a little bit colder. That lends itself more towards stronger defensive performances than offensive ones, but I feel good about Oregon's defense in this spot. I feel good about Oregon's special teams in this spot. And I have some questions about the offense. Not as many as others, but definitely some. And if Oregon goes out and is held to 13 points or fewer, even though it's a really good Hawkeyes defense, yeah, my level of criticism of Will Stein or Dante Moore or whoever would be at fault in the hypothetical, of course, you have to watch the games play out to figure out where the real culprit is. But yeah, my level of criticism will go up pretty significantly. So 24 or more, that's where my head is at. If Oregon does that in this spot, I'll feel good. I'll say, yeah, it's a solid offensive performance. If they go crazy and get over 30 at Kinnick, we'll have a different type of conversation here on the show to be a good one for those of us that have been more in the Will Stein camp than some others. But we'll see how that all plays out. Andrew sent this one in. You've said it in the past, and I tend to agree. Sometimes Stein tries to outsmart the room and maybe outsmart himself. It reminds me of the Blazers teams with Pippen, Rasheed, Brian Grant, Steve Smith, Detlef Schrempf, etc. Schrempf. They had so many weapons. They didn't have go-to weapons or go-to plays when it mattered or when challenged. I'm not next to the nose guy with football, but I'm always a great sports psychologist. That's just my observation. I think that with the Oregon offense, what leads people to this particular mindset, and this is not the first time I've come across it, it's the sequence that I imagine we'll see on Saturday again, that Oregon has usually done once a game, where they get funky with formations for like a 3 or 4 play sequence and try to catch a defense napping. And more often than not, it has worked. Now, it didn't work against Wisconsin, but it worked against Rutgers, and it worked against Indiana, got them their only touchdown. And I'd have to go back and double check the other games where they've done it. But that overall has had plenty of success. But on this front, and I talked about this last week on the show, I definitely do want to see Oregon make a concerted effort to get DeCorian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq the football. If you have an offensive game plan that doesn't heavily feature those guys to not just make productive plays, but draw the defense's attention and open up other areas and plays in your offensive game plan, then I think you are making a mistake, because those guys are game-changing caliber talents. And when Oregon played Penn State on the road, wasn't a great first half, but the second half was good, and then they executed twice in overtime, scoring touchdowns. Your 2 leading receivers were DeCorian Moore. He had 7 for 89, and Sadiq had, I think, 6 for 50 or something like that. So if those sorts of numbers can emerge and the Oregon offense is at 24 or more, I'll be a pretty happy camper this week. But I want to hear from you guys and your offensive expectations going into this game, because I feel solid about Oregon's offense. Definitely not great. Not as great as I do about the defense, and probably about the same as I do about the special teams, which is to say above average, but not exactly where I'd like it to be after the Wisconsin first quarter. Because once the weather got crazy again, what are you going to do? But it might be crazy weather this week. It's November in Iowa. We'll see how it all plays out. So let me know your offensive expectations, how many points you want to see Oregon score to feel good about the offense after this week. I cannot wait for the next segment, because as I thought about it more, I realized, I'm just going to name Oregon's 5 best individual players. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And college football is around every week and all throughout the week. You have got MACtion, Conference USA games, sometimes a Friday night Big 12 matchup. If you want to spice up anything like that, make it even more exciting than the greatest sport on earth already is, FanDuel is the place to do just that. You've got point spreads, you've got money lines, you've got prop bets, season outlook bets, conference championship odds, national title odds. It's all over there. FanDuel is the place you want to go. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Very excited for this next segment. Very excited. Normally, on Tuesdays, I do individual standouts. But when Oregon has a bye week, I can't do that. And so I got to thinking, how can I make my favorite segment that I can only do certain times of the year when Oregon's actually playing football games? How could I do that on a Tuesday? I thought, you know what? I don't even want to go under the radar, guys, which is normally the spirit of this segment, as my everydayers know. I just want to go, who have been the top individual players that stand out in my head? And I did this quickly to see who came to mind. What names flashed into my head when I sat down and said, okay, who are Oregon's 5 top individual standouts this year? Basically, me saying, who do I think have been Oregon's 5 best players this season? So, let me go in order. Number 1, Brandon Finney. What more could you say about this guy? A true freshman sensation, a superstar in the making. Not even in the making, he just looks like a flat-out superstar. That is someone who very quickly has become someone who I think offensive coordinators have to game plan around. That quarterbacks have to say, do I really want to throw at that guy? Is that really where I want to try and go with the football, or am I going to look elsewhere? That impact and the consistency with which he's played, which is why he's at the top of this list, absolutely lands him as one of Oregon's 5 best players on the team right now. To this point in the season, this could change as the year goes on. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts below. If you think I leave somebody off, you have different order, anything like that. But I have Brandon Finney number 1. There have been a lot of great players for the Ducks this year. You don't go 7-1 without having a bunch of guys that are playing really well. I don't know that there's anybody that is playing at a higher level week in and week out than Brandon Finney. Number 2 is a little under the radar, just a little, except if you're someone that listens to my show, because I've been gassing this guy up all season long. And by the way, players that just missed, this particular group of 5 players, Poncho just missed, and I mean just missed because he's been really, really awesome. Mateo Uiagalelei just missed. But Emmanuel Prainon, as I have been saying, is Oregon's best offensive lineman. Poncho does a lot of really good things. He does. And last year, he gave up, I think, just 1 sack. I think he's only given up 1 or 2 sacks in his entire career starting at center, which is pretty crazy work. But he's been so good, and the O-line has played well for the most part. Of course, not entirely. Part of the reason that I have Poncho outside the top 5 is the Indiana game. The offensive line wasn't picking up Indiana's pressures as well as they needed to, and that to me falls on, in order, offense coordinator, quarterback, center. Those are the guys that are getting everybody in the right protection and organizing all that stuff. But again, I'm not. This is not a Rip Poncho segment. He's been awesome. I really hope he comes back next year. I don't know that he will because he's been so good, but he's improved a lot against the run. Emmanuel Prainon is kind of like he's kind of been the ideal transfer that you bring in at any spot, where he just is plug and play into your roster. He's starting and he is producing at a high level right away and throughout the entire season. The PFF grades reflect this. The film that I go back and rewatch over and over reflects this. And week to week, when you look at Oregon's best run plays, they often come going left. And I think that's a huge, huge function of what Prainon has brought to the table. Coming over from USC, who, of course, Oregon plays in a couple of weeks, I think he has been everything we could have hoped for and more at that left guard spot. He's been fantastic. Number 3, and I thought about this. I fought with myself, but I said, Spencer, you can't let your personal feelings get in the way here. You can't be Anakin Skywalker. You have to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I am Obi-Wan Kenobi right now. Not Sid from Toy Story today. That was Friday. But Bear Alexander is number 3. And you talk about guys that have been once again developed via the portal by coming to Oregon. Bear Alexander is the latest great example. There are several, at a couple of different spots, whether you're talking about Bo Nix, Tez, Jordan Birch, the list goes on of guys that have come to Oregon, elevated themselves because of the work the coaching staff has done. Bear Alexander might be the best example of that of them all. He has been consistently Oregon's most disruptive interior defensive lineman. And it pains me It pains me to do this at some level because I am chair of the Amari Washington fan club, and Amari's been really good this year. Don't get that misconstrued. Between the two, Bear has been better. Bear is, I think, a better run defender. Amari is a better pass rusher. And Bear has just been a little more impactful, I think, this year. But both have been outstanding. But Bear Alexander has just been an absolute force in the middle of Oregon's defensive line. It's been an awesome thing to see. Really, really awesome. So he's been number 3. Now, this next one is a tie. So I guess technically I have 6 players in my top 5. But the guys that I mentioned, DeCorian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq. And I thought about making this a coin flip and picking one or going, but again, I think that and Sadiq did not have a good game against Wisconsin. So if you wanted to lean DeCorian Moore in that sense, I think you certainly could, because he also has been a force blocking, obviously tight end blocking, a little bit more impactful consistently than receiver blocking. But the way these guys block on the perimeter at wide receiver, led by DeCorian Moore, and other guys do a great job like Gary Bryant, I think that's been noticeable and really helpful for the Oregon run game to spring running backs on the outside for some of the explosive runs that I wanted to see coming into the year, and we have seen, which has been great. But DeCorian Moore and Kenyon Sadiq kind of meshed together, I think have just been so outstandingly awesome. And it just, even though their stats are not where maybe we'd like them to be, I think you have to look at that more as a function of Dante Moore and Will Stein and not the two of them. And I think if you were lining up Oregon's best players top to bottom this year, I'd be hard-pressed to keep those guys off of the list. So screw it. This is my top 6. I'm going to the top 6 standouts here. Now, for the next one, thought about this a pretty good amount, because there are a lot of different ways you could go. And I could leave the list at DeCorian Moore, Kenyon Sadiq, and call it good. But I'm putting Jordan Davison at number 6. You can't leave him off the list. You just can't. He looks like Oregon's best running back. He keeps getting better as the year goes on. I'm excited to see what his career winds up being by the time it comes to a close with the Ducks. But he has been the most consistent throughout the year. Now, just off the list also is Dante Moore, who has been great this year. There have, however, against Indiana and Wisconsin, been prolonged stretches of substandard play. And so the reason I take Dante Moore and don't have him on there, even though I think he's been very good, is the guy that's been more consistent between those two guys in the backfield, Dante Moore and Jordan Davison. The answer is Jordan Davison. And yeah, he has an easier job, but Davison also does a lot of the details really well. He'll block for running backs. He is good in pass protection. There's nothing really that it looks like he can't do. He's evolved his game very quickly to go from being a short yardage guy to a complete back that I think we're all comfortable with. Any week he were to lead Oregon in carries, whether it's him or Noah Whittington or De'Aaron Hill, I'm fine with any of that. But Davison kind of looks like he's establishing himself into that particular role, which is awesome for a true freshman. So those are the guys that have stood out most to me, and it doesn't mean I don't think other guys have played well, but if you're going with the best, you got to make some hard decisions, and I go Brandon Finney, Emmanuel Pranon, Bear Alexander. I'll order them and say I'll put DeCorian Moore first, Kenyon Sadiq, or DeCorian Moore at 4th, Kenyon Sadiq at 5th. Heck, Jordan Davison might even be low. You know what? As I say this out loud, no, I'll stick with it. I'll stick with it because I cannot overlook the Penn State performance and what DeCorian Moore did in that particular game against a defense littered with NFL caliber guys. But again, I think that what those 3 skill position players have done every single week, we're at the point watching Oregon where if they're not featured, we're all sitting around wondering why. And I don't think there's going to be a problem featuring Jordan Davison each week because, man, he's been really, really good. Just the explosive runs, the contact balance, everything across the board, I've been really impressed. So Finney, Pranon, Alexander, DeCorian Moore, Kenyon Sadiq, Jordan Davison. Those are the guys that I think are Oregon's best football players right now. just off the edge. Amari Washington, Dante Moore, Mateo Uyunglele. A lot of names. Let me know. I'm interested to see what kind of debate this sparks down in the good old YouTube comments. So definitely let me know. What's more likely, Oregon or Iowa winning by several scores? First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football's back, and we're all happy about it. If you are in the Iowa area, want to go to the Oregon game this week, guess what? Game Time is the place you want to do it, because actually getting tickets to a game shouldn't be more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. You want to use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. So I wanted to get a couple tickets to go see Oregon play Auburn in Las Vegas. And guess what? Game Time's the place I went to and saved money doing it. Got a great deal. Process was super easy. Tickets are on my phone, right? This phone, right here. Right here. Spencer's phone. Tickets are already on there. Ready to go. Process took less than 10 minutes total to get tickets for the game. Found a great deal. Everything you want, college football and beyond, they've got it. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, mailbag question to end today's show before we get to a little Oregon trivia. Dana White's burner sends this one in. SSA, Iowa has a better chance to win by 3 scores or more than Oregon. Oof. I don't think this was sent with an overwhelming sense of negativity attached to it. I think this is just a curiosity that killed the cat sort of question. A better chance to win by 3 scores. So, before I give you my number, I'll give you a little bit of context here. Iowa has beaten several opponents by 3 or more scores this season. Those opponents are Albany, UMass, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Minnesota is the best of those teams by quite a bit. The last team that Iowa played was Minnesota on October 25th, same day Oregon played Wisconsin. Oregon struggled with the Badgers in the ugly weather conditions, of course, and Iowa just trounced Minnesota. It was actually over on Locked On College Football. I have deemed it, I think fairly, my second worst game prediction of the year. First worst was Illinois beating Indiana in Bloomington, 63-10. I picked Minnesota to upset Iowa, and they lost 41-3. So you can't get them all right. I've had some dynamite picks this year. Those were not 2 of them. In fact, they were the 2 worst. So those are the only opponent. This is not me coming on here in response to this question and saying that Iowa can't win the game. I fully believe that they can. Absolutely. If Oregon comes out and is making the same sorts of mistakes that we've been talking about for the last several weeks. If Dante Moore is not making good reads, if they're not sharp with some of their blocks, or they're making little mistakes like drops or missed field goals or stuff like that, yeah, Iowa can go win the football game. By 3 scores, I think Oregon's well above any of those teams. So Iowa's progress has been profound. I have them as a top 25 team. We'll see if the playoff committee puts them as a top 25 team. I think they absolutely should. But the caliber of opponent that they have beaten soundly this year, yeah, I don't see Oregon having that sort of game. You're talking 17 or more points. And with Iowa and the way Oregon's defense is, that probably means the offense is scoring, 6 points, and Iowa's winning 23-6 or more. Like 24-6, and Oregon either went for 2 or got 2 field goals and probably got stuffed on a 4th and goal to go situation and doesn't score a touchdown the entire game. I don't think that's particularly likely. I don't think that's how Iowa would win the game. Conversely, though, something I've thought about going into this matchup, it's not game day, of course, because they're going to Lubbock, as they should, for Texas Tech and BYU. Really happy that they're getting that. But I've been to Lubbock. It's cool. I was just outside, wasn't able to go inside Texas Tech Stadium, but it looks cool. They used to throw tortillas. I think they stopped that. That's too bad. But anyway, so the game I've thought about that I would just love to see on Saturday is 2023 Utah in Salt Lake City. Tough crowd, physical team. Oregon favored by just under a touchdown by a point or two. They won that game 35-6. That would be really refreshing, comforting for some people, invigorating, exciting, hope restoring, all that sort of stuff. I haven't made my score prediction yet. We'll save that for later in the week. I think it's more likely Oregon does that than Iowa were to do that to the Ducks. So Iowa's a better chance to win by 3 scores or more than Oregon does. You know, I don't know that Oregon's chances of winning by 3 scores or more are super duper high. I definitely think they're higher than Iowa's. So I'm going to give that one a 2. Only reason it's not a 1, respect for Iowa's defense. I'll notch that at 2.5. 2.5, respect for Iowa's defense, that if Oregon comes out and doesn't have a good game plan, is getting out schemed, and Dante Moore is confused, yeah, they could just not score a touchdown. Sure, I could see it. Only got 1 touchdown against Indiana, so it's not impossible. But yeah, especially if the weather gets ugly and it's a low-scoring game, I think that'll make it hard for either side to pull away. So let's wrap today with some Tuesday trivia. I will not say I'm excited for the offseason so that I can do trivia every day, but I'm a little looking forward to it. But no, I love covering games way more. So, this one. Who's the last Oregon starting quarterback to go undrafted into the NFL? Great trivia question, by the way. The last one to go undrafted, I think I know the answer. I'm going to think out loud for a moment. Bo Nix, obviously not undrafted. Dylan Gabriel, also not undrafted. Gabriel, another example of that portal development I was talking about earlier. He had an undrafted free agent grade. That's why he stayed in college another year, and the Browns took him in the 3rd round. He has started games as a rookie. Not bad. I believe the answer is Anthony Brown, who found a way onto a roster at one point in time. He might still be floating around, but Tyler Shuck, who was an Oregon quarterback once upon a time, as we remember, was drafted by the Saints, started over the weekend, did not win the football game against the Rams. I don't think anybody's surprised at that. But yeah, the last Oregon starting quarterback. You know, Dylan Gabriel last year, Bo Nix 2 years before that. Anthony Brown is my official answer. I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about that particular response. So, whoever sent me that question, make sure you send me a DM with the answer. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.